I used to tell myself that mornings didn't matter, that they were just a stretch of hours you had to get through before the real part of the day began. But lately, I'd been clinging to them. The quiet, the coffee, the way the world felt unbothered by me. That's how I ended up at the same small cafe almost every morning before class. It wasn't fancy. Half the tables wobbled, and the chalkboard menu always smudged by noon. But it was steady, and she was there. Mrs. Carter, my best friend's mom. It sounds like a setup for a bad joke, but the truth was simpler, quieter. She was usually by the window, hair pinned back loosely like she hadn't bothered to redo it after waking. She'd spread her papers on the table, work, bills, notes I never read closely enough to figure out, and she'd sip her coffee slowly, as if dragging out the only part of the day that belonged to her. I didn't sit with her at first. We'd just trade glances, the polite kind, like neighbors acknowledging each other on the street. But it was enough to get lodged under my skin. The way her eyes softened when they landed on me, the way her hand hovered just a second longer over the rim of her cup before she looked away. One morning, she broke the pattern. "You always order the same thing," she said when I passed her table. "Medium drip, 2 sugars." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. I paused, my coffee burning through the paper cup in my hand. "Guess I'm predictable. Or loyal," she said, and her mouth tugged at a smile before she bent back over her papers. It was nothing. A few words. But it stayed with me the whole day, echoing in the silence of my room where my phone lit up with messages I didn't answer. I stared at them, friends making plans, reminders I should have responded to, but the words never came. Instead, I kept replaying hers. Loyal. The next morning, I sat across from her. Not planned. Just, when she looked up, I couldn't pretend I hadn't noticed her waiting. "You don't mind?" I asked, gesturing at the empty chair. "Of course not." She moved a folder aside, making space that felt larger than it was. We didn't talk much. A few remarks about the weather, about the cafe running out of scones early. But the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, like we were both too tired to perform for anyone, and that felt like permission. She had this habit of folding the edge of her napkin into tiny squares while she thought. I found myself watching her hands more than I should have. My eyes flicked down, then back up too quickly, hoping she hadn't caught me. But she did. Her lips pressed together like she might laugh, though she didn't. Later, when I stood to leave, she surprised me again. "You've got class, don't you?" she asked. "Yeah, in 10. Then go. I'll see you tomorrow." She said it so casually, as if we had already agreed on it. The words followed me out the door. "I'll see you tomorrow." That night, my phone buzzed just as I was about to set it face down. A message from a number I didn't recognize. "You left your notebook at the cafe." "I've got it." Mrs. Carter. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I hadn't left my notebook, and that was the first time I realized she might be waiting for me, too. The next day, she was already waiting when I walked in. Same table, same window light spilling across her papers. Only this time, my notebook was sitting neatly at the edge of her table. I picked it up, thumbed through the pages. Blank. "You know I didn't actually leave this behind." Her eyes flicked up, calm, unreadable. "I know, but it got you back here, didn't it?" There it was, the kind of honesty that landed heavier than it should. I sat without asking. We didn't rush into talking. The cafe hummed around us, steam hissing from the machine, spoons clinking against cups. She was folding her napkin again, neat lines pressed into smaller squares, and I realized I wanted to know everything about her. What she thought about in those silences, what kept her up at night. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked suddenly, surprising myself. She tilted her head. "Miss what?" I shrugged. "Being younger. Having time stretch out ahead of you." Her laugh was small, dry. "Every day? But you don't really notice when it's happening. You only notice when it's gone." She leaned back in her chair, looking at me like she wasn't sure if she should have said that much. "Why? You worried about getting old already?" I shook my head, smiling just enough. "Not yet. Just thinking, I guess." Her smile faded slower than mine. For a moment, she looked softer, less guarded. When I was your age, I thought I knew exactly how my life would look. House, family, all of it. Some of that came true. Some of it didn't. She stopped there, words trailing like she'd pulled a curtain halfway closed. I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. The risk hung between us. Her being who she was, me being too young, the invisible line we both knew we shouldn't cross. I stirred my coffee even though I didn't need sugar. My thoughts kept looping. She's your best friend's mom. She's older. This can't mean anything. But then she brushed a strand of hair from her face, and I imagined, just for a second, what it would feel like if she reached across the table instead of pulling back. The silence stretched. Not heavy, just alive. You're quieter today, she said finally. Just tired, I lied. She reached for the teapot the waitress had left, poured some into her cup, then into mine without asking. The steam curled between us. I don't know why the gesture felt intimate, but it did, like she was letting me in without meaning to. When I finally stood to leave, she touched my arm lightly, barely there, just her fingers brushing the sleeve of my jacket. Don't forget your notebook this time, she said. It was nothing. A reminder, a half smile. But walking out into the late morning air, I couldn't shake it. That touch kept replaying in my head, louder than her words. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The rain started just as I was leaving class. Heavy, sudden, the kind that made people run for cover instead of waiting it out. By the time I got to the cafe, my jacket was soaked through. She was already there. Of course she was, sitting by the window with her papers. Her eyes widened when she saw me, water dripping from my hair onto the floor. You'll catch something like that. Guess I didn't plan ahead. She slid her umbrella across the table toward me, though it was useless now. Still, the gesture made my chest tighten. I sat, shivering slightly, hands wrapped around the coffee cup when it came. You should have gone straight home. I shrugged. Figured I'd stop by. For a while we didn't talk. Just the rain against the glass, her pen tapping lightly as she pretended to write. My skin prickled with the awareness of how close we were. Closer than usual, the window seat smaller than the others. At one point, she reached for the sugar, her hand brushing mine. Not an accident. Or maybe it was. She pulled back too quickly for me to be sure. I shouldn't, she started, then stopped. Her voice was lower than usual. I looked at her. Shouldn't what? She shook her head, staring down at her notes. Forget it. The space between us changed after that. Tighter, sharper. I wanted to ask her what she meant, wanted to push, but before I could, the door chimed. It was my friend. Her son. He spotted me immediately. Man, what are you doing here? His eyes slid to her, then back to me, curious. I stumbled over my answer. Just coffee. Before heading home. He laughed, casual, but I felt the weight in her stillness beside me. She gave a polite smile, said little. He didn't stay long, just grabbed a drink and left, but the damage was done. The air felt different after. She gathered her papers quickly, stacking them too neatly. You should go, she said, not unkindly, but distant. I wanted to argue, to tell her that his seeing us together meant nothing, that we weren't doing anything wrong. But the word stuck, because maybe we were. We walked out together anyway, the rain softening into a drizzle. At the corner, we stopped under the awning. Close enough that I could see the raindrops caught in her hair, the faint smudge of ink on her thumb. I opened my mouth, closed it. She did the same. For a second, it felt like gravity shifted, like we were leaning towards something we shouldn't. The kind of pull that doesn't ask permission. Then she exhaled, sharp, almost like a laugh but not. You should go, she repeated, softer this time. I nodded, but my feet didn't move. Not right away. And in that pause, just before we both stepped back, I swear she almost reached for me. It was late when I saw her again, not at the cafe, but outside, the street lamp buzzing faintly above us. She was sitting on the bench by her front porch, jacket wrapped tight around her. A folder rested on her lap, but she wasn't reading it. I slowed as I passed, then stopped. Couldn't sleep? She looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. Something like that. You. Same. I sat beside her, not too close, but not far either. The night was cool, damp from earlier rain. Crickets loud in the grass. For a while, neither of us spoke. Just the hum of the streetlight, the uneven rhythm of cars passing in the distance. She broke the silence first. You know, this is dangerous. What is? Her lips pressed together. She shook her head, looking down at her hands. Us. Sitting here. Talking like this. It looks like nothing, but, she trailed off. I swallowed. My chest tightened in the silence that followed. Do you want me to stop? Her eyes lifted slowly, meeting mine. I couldn't read them. That's not the point. The folders slipped from her lap, papers scattering at our feet. We both reached down, hands brushing as we grabbed at the loose sheets. My fingers touched hers, brief, accidental, but enough to make her freeze. She didn't pull away. Not right away. Then she laughed under her breath, a sound edged with something sharper than humor. God, what am I doing? I wanted to answer, to tell her she wasn't the only one tangled up in this, but the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I said, it doesn't feel wrong to me. Her hand stilled on the papers. The night stretched around us. It should, she whispered. I leaned back, staring at the flickering street lamp. My pulse was too loud. When I'm with you, I don't feel like a kid or your son's friend. I just feel. I stopped myself, the word hanging unspoken between us. Seen. Her head turned toward me slowly. The look she gave me was raw, stripped of the careful distance she usually kept. Don't say that, she murmured. But her voice wasn't firm. It was tired. I couldn't tell if she wanted me to stop or to keep going. My hand hovered in the space between us, inches from hers, not moving, not daring. You'll regret this, she said finally, but her tone cracked in the middle. Will you? I asked. The question hung there, unanswered. And in that fragile pause, right before either of us leaned closer or pulled away, the sound of a car door slammed down the street, breaking whatever spell we'd been under. She gathered her papers quickly, stood, smoothing her jacket like nothing had happened. Good night, she said, without looking at me. But her hand trembled slightly as she held the folder to her chest. And I couldn't stop thinking about the question she hadn't answered. She stopped coming to the cafe. At first, I told myself it was nothing. She was busy, running errands, maybe working from home. But after the third morning of staring at her empty seat by the window, the silence started to gnaw. I tried not to show it. I ordered my coffee, sat where we used to, pretended to read. But I kept glancing at the door, half expecting her to walk in, fold her napkin, meet my eyes. She didn't. By the fifth day, I gave up waiting and walked past her house on my way back. The curtains were drawn, porch light off even though the sun hadn't fully set. Her car sat in the driveway. Dust from the rain still streaked across the windshield. She was home. She just wasn't opening the door. That night, I found myself typing out a message. Are you okay? Haven't seen you around. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over send. Deleted it. Typed again. Did I do something? Deleted that too. The truth sat heavy in my chest. Maybe I had. When I finally saw her, it wasn't at the cafe or on the porch. It was in the grocery store, late evening, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. She was standing by the fruit section, hair pulled back, cart half full. And next to her, someone else. A man. Older. Not much older than her, maybe her age. He said something low, and she laughed. Not forced. Not the brittle kind she used when she wanted to deflect. Real. I froze halfway down the aisle. She saw me. For a second, her smile faltered. Then she gave me a nod, small, polite, like we were neighbors and nothing more. I nodded back. My throat felt tight. I left without buying anything. That night, I lay awake, the sound of rain starting up again outside. I thought about the man, about her laugh. I thought about how stupid I must have looked, waiting for her in that cafe every morning, imagining I mattered more than I did. But then my phone buzzed. A message. From her. I'm sorry for disappearing. It's complicated. I typed back immediately. Complicated how? But before I hit send, I stopped. Because maybe I didn't want to know. Or maybe I already did. The unsent message sat on my screen until the battery died. And for the first time since it began, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next morning, her seat by the window was empty again. And I didn't sit there. It was late again when it happened. I'd just gotten back from work, the parking lot still damp from rain, when I saw her porch light flicker on. She was standing at the door, arms crossed, jacket slipping off one shoulder. Not waiting, at least not obviously. But when our eyes met, she didn't look away. I hesitated, then walked closer. Hey. Her voice was quiet, almost apologetic. Hey. For a second, neither of us moved. The hum of the street lamp filled the air between us. Then she stepped aside. You can come in, if you want. Her kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and lemon cleaner. Papers were stacked on the counter, dishes half done in the sink. Normal. Too normal for how fast my pulse was moving. She poured tea, set the mug in front of me without asking. I wrapped my hands around it, though it was too hot to drink. I shouldn't have disappeared, she said finally, leaning against the counter. That wasn't fair. I stared at the steam rising from my cup. I thought maybe you didn't want to see me anymore. Her lips pressed together. She sat across from me, folding her hands on the table. That's not it. It's just, she stopped, exhaled. I don't know how to explain without sounding selfish. I shook my head. Try. She looked at me, really looked. You make me feel younger. Not in a silly way. In a way that makes me forget how heavy things are. And I like it too much. Her voice cracked on that last part. And that scares me. The words landed like a confession, but also a warning. I swallowed hard. My hand tightened on the mug. I don't see you as my friend's mom. Or just someone older. I see you. And I don't want to stop. The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the low hum of the fridge. She reached for her tea, but missed, her hand trembling slightly. You don't know what it costs, though? If this goes wrong, I lose more than you. I know, I said. And I did. For a long time. We just sat there, the space between us small but impossible. My heart thudded against my ribs. I wanted to close the distance, but I didn't. Not until she shifted her chair an inch closer, just enough for our knees to brush under the table. The touch was nothing, barely there, but it felt like everything. We didn't kiss. We didn't reach across the table. We just sat with that small connection, letting it hold the weight of everything we couldn't say. Finally, she gave me a faint smile, tired, soft, almost defeated. Okay. And that was enough. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic choice, no sudden leap into something reckless. It was slower than that, like rain soaking into the soil, unnoticed until the ground feels different under your feet. After that night in her kitchen, we didn't talk about what had been said. We didn't need to. Instead, things shifted in ways too small for anyone else to notice. She started coming back to the cafe. Not every morning, not in a way that looked planned. But sometimes, when I walked in, she'd already be there, her papers spread out, tea cooling by her hand. I'd sit across from her, order my black coffee, and the silence between us felt lighter. Other mornings, I'd find her on the bench outside her house, jacket wrapped tight, folder balanced on her lap. I'd sit with her, neither of us saying much. Sometimes we'd talk about nothing, her work, my classes, the weather. Sometimes we'd just listen to the crickets or the rain. And slowly, that became enough. Her son never seemed to notice, or maybe he chose not to. We never gave him reason to. From the outside, it looked ordinary. Just two people sharing space. But under the surface, everything had shifted. One Sunday afternoon, she invited me in while she made tea. I helped her dry the dishes, stacking them carefully in cabinets too high for her to reach without stretching. She laughed when I teased her about it, swatting my arm lightly. That laugh stayed with me all day. Later, I caught myself checking the clock without meaning to. 8:47 a.m., the time I usually saw her in the cafe window. It had become a kind of marker for me, the way the day tilted depending on whether she was there. I realized then that this wasn't about moments of almost crossing lines. It wasn't about near kisses or confessions held back. It was about how, little by little, my world had started to bend around her presence, and hers around mine. There's still guilt sometimes. Still hesitation. We don't pretend the gap isn't there. Age, history, all of it. But the weight of it doesn't scare me the way it used to. She once said I made her feel younger. I think what she really meant was lighter. And I feel that too, when I'm with her. Tonight, we sat on the same porch bench where everything nearly unraveled weeks ago. The street lamp still hummed, the air damp with late summer rain. She reached for my hand this time. No hesitation, no trembling. Just her fingers sliding quietly into mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. And in that silence, I thought, this is what it means for someone to finally see you. And stay. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?